Hey there,
Hey,
Kevin.
what's
Good
up?
morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
I am delightful. I am so excited to be talking about all things badass today. And the reason why I'm excited to talk about all things badass today is that we're flipping the script. So, people who've been following me for a while, people that I'm friends with, people who tolerate me know that I talk about badasses. I'm a champion of badass. They are the people that go 80 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone without checking to see if anyone's strapped in for the ride, let alone interested in the destination. And I find them wonderfully complex. I find them so interesting. And we all know how they get in their own way. Sometimes they're moving too fast for the conditions. Sometimes they're only speaking in half sentences and they forget that people aren't mind readers. Sometimes, given the conditions in the room, it might not be the right degree of power given the whatever is going on environmentally in the room. So they don't wake up in the morning and ask themselves, "What's the best way to be disruptive today?" They wake up in the morning and they say, "Oh my gosh, I've just like thought of something really amazing today and I can't wait to bring it to light and I can't wait to invite people to join me." And the challenge becomes that, again, they're not reading the room. And so instead of being seen as the person that other people are happy to have on a team, other people say, "Oh, there she goes again," or "Oh, there he goes again. Why can't they just stop?" So I love them. And more frequently, people have been asking me, "Can you coach someone into tapping into what makes a badass awesome?" Because I'm a big fan of championing badasses, and I know that there is a way that they can redeploy their power for other people to be happy that they're in the room. And so I got to thinking about it. I'm like, can you hack your way into being a badass? And the good news is, the short answer is yes, you can hack your way into being a badass. You can hack your way into tapping into whatever makes a badass a badass. So, are you ready to play? You're interested in deep dig?
100%. Because what comes up for me is thinking about something like, and we're all familiar with assessments, but disc profile. And how often with the disc profile, we take whether you're I'm like a 99D. I joke, my wife and I joke that we're both like a 300 on the extended scale. So sometimes it's really interesting in the Kermis household, but God help our son. So D and I, but like the S and C, because they sit so low, just kind of get discarded. And
Yeah.
whenever I've had conversations about a disc profile, they never even come up. They're like, "Oh, you're this and this," but I still have those elements in there. And just like you're talking about badassery, yes, there are the folks who are saying, "I clearly identify as this. I want to become better at learning how to live in that space because I'm there. I want to be there 24/7. And how am I more effective?" But there's also a massive category of individuals who have those elements. And what if they're able to go kind of pull from them a little bit and dip their toe in the water and learn how to pull those things up versus say, "Well, that's not really who I am, so put it to the side," because it's there. It's part of who you are. So why not learn how to
Absolutely.
play with it in a way that makes sense for you?
Absolutely. I mean, we're not binary, right? We're humans. We're wonderfully complex. We have a little bit of everything in all of us. And you don't have to be a badass. You don't even have to want to be a badass to be able to tap into what makes a badass interesting. So as I was kind of contemplating, well, how do you hack into it? Like, how do you back your way into it? And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently, and she said to me, what would be, she said, it's almost like an alter ego. I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. And then I said, who is famous that had an alter ego? And the short answer is Beyonce. So, yes, I know no one ever thought to put Beyonce, you and me in the same thoughts.
Yet here we are.
But
So,
here we are, and we're going to roll with it. So, a little over 10 years ago, Beyonce drops a surprise album, self-titled, and surprise, literally surprise. Radio wasn't expecting it. Big retail wasn't expecting it because and at the time people were buying CDs. There was no CD available at big retail. The only way it was available was if you went to iTunes and you bought it. So it's a surprise drop overnight. It goes to #1 in over 90 countries on iTunes virtually immediately. And all of her fans are sharing with one another as they're listening to the album for the first time what's really resonating with them. The other thing that she did that was really interesting was she dropped a visual album. So she also shared 14 music videos to go with the 14 songs that came out on iTunes. And so it was, now people do surprise albums all the time, but to the extent there wasn't advanced PR, social media marketing, there weren't singles released in advance, there weren't music videos released in advance, which meant that she retained control as an artist, she retained control as a business person, and also she allowed her fans to have control over what songs would rise to the top in terms of airplay. And so shortly thereafter, it hits the Billboard 200. Now, the reason for me to bring all of this up was what she did was so incredibly risky, and she had no idea that it was going to work. Yes, she's Beyonce. Yes, she's had a body of work up until that point, but she stood a huge risk of pissing off radio, right? There was a huge risk of pissing off retail because over 10 years ago, people were buying CDs at Target and Walmart. So that she cut them out of the action, really. And so I'm like, wow, this is a love of risk, a love of leaning into risk to be available of what's on the other side of risk is what makes a badass a badass. And so some people might say, well, that's great. That's Beyonce. I'm not Beyonce. And I am literally not Beyonce, and you are literally not Beyonce either. As charming as we both are, and as talented and creative as we both are, we are not Beyonce. And this is where I want to play with you a little bit more and get off my soapbox a little bit is, let's think about the largest piece of business we've ever pitched. My thumb is going up. The fact, Kevin, that you are a serial entrepreneur, that involved a certain amount of risk. Quitting a job before you had another one lined up, firing a client because you were no longer a good fit for them, or they may not have been a good fit for you. Applying for that job that was a super enormous, ginormous stretch, that the chances of you getting this job were so small, but you did it anyway. So, what if we were to allow ourselves the gift of seeing all the times that we've embraced risk in our life? And I'm curious to hear more from you about this idea of embracing risk.
Yeah, so there are several things that come up for me. And when you talked about iTunes, first of all, one of the first thing that came into my mind was when U2 decided to put the song on everybody's phone, and that did piss a lot of people off. And yet, still here, yet still loved. And the thing that comes up for me is when you do enough work to make sure that people know where you're coming from and that you come from a place of good intent, you got a lot of latitude there. You've got a lot of latitude. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to piss some people off sometimes. It doesn't mean that sometimes you're going to miss the mark. We've all been there. But it's not as if you cannot recover from that. And the question becomes, what are you learning?
Right.
Are you now, if you are super risk averse, are you playing so small that you are playing not to lose versus playing to win?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if you're constantly playing not to lose, the one thing I can guarantee you you're not going to do is you're not going to learn. You're not going to learn, and
That's exactly right.
that's where the growth is coming from.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
and there's a fantastic, I play on LinkedIn a lot,
Yeah.
and it has been really curious to me as a thing that I used to look at as a time suck, now seeing it as a place to go and to test things out and to just have conversations. And when I'm not a scientific mind at all. So it's not as if I have a list of 15 things I want to test today. I just show up from a place of curiosity, trying to
Right.
be additive, and 9 times out of 10, I mean, the things that unlocks, whether it's relationships, whatever, it's great. And sometimes it misses too. Sometimes I write things that piss people off. Like,
Right.
I can't own that. So I do think it's an exploration in that, to get curious when you're going through this, to pay attention to, particularly whenever we're pushing an edge, to pay attention to where that friction comes up, where that part of us that is risk averse, or where that part of us is that feels safe where we're at right now, and not be combative with it, but start a dialogue. Because why are we listening to that voice over this other one, over the badass that may be like the lowercase letter on the disc profile and not the one that's, the highest number that's ranked? Why does this thing always get the microphone and this doesn't? And why does that make perfect sense? And what if we put this over here for a second and we lean into the badassery? We lean into being risky. We lean into being a little edgy about something.
Yeah, and this distinction of like playing to win or playing not to lose, it's the idea of badassery itself is, it's not so much an attachment to an outcome so much as attachment to learning something as a function of leaning into risk, right? So there are marathons and there are sprints. And the idea here is, I can't get caught up in individual performance. If I get caught up in individual performance, I'm not going to try anything, right? And if I am committed to the idea of something, but not attached to specific episodes, I will be able to go further, faster in service of whatever it is that I might be committed to. And it's this idea of there goes my thumb again. There's there's this idea of growth mindset. There's that awesome book, Mindset by Carol Dweck. And I know you and I are big fans of saying that yet is a really powerful word. It's not that I haven't done it. It's just that I haven't done it yet. And always being in pursuit of learning something in service of what's greater. Always showing up in curiosity, always showing up in creativity. And, creativity isn't exclusive to a badass. Curiosity isn't exclusive to a badass. So again, you don't have to want to be a badass, and there is ample access that you have to showing up in creativity and curiosity. Who's going to take you to jail for saying, what would happen if we tried X?
Right.
And that is that's an example of a question that a badass likes to ask is, what would happen if we stood in front of a whiteboard and like mapped something out? There's nothing wrong with wanting to play with the idea of embracing risk in service of learning something on the other side of it.
No, I like that. And I like the idea, like you're saying, between risk and play, and being able to just take these things and get less attached to the outcome, get less attached to, and really pay attention to where our need for certainty. This is one of the things I hear people say a lot is, I'm not quite sure what to do next. I disagree categorically with that for all of us. We all know what to do. We may not know what to do, but we know what we want. Even if it's stuff down. It's one of the things that's, when we met in the community we met in, it was one of the things that was frustrating me to tears, which was, I am constantly saying, I don't know what I want to do, what I want to be, what I want to create next. And yet I know inside I do. There's just part of me that just won't get out of my own way. So this idea of playing, this idea of getting curious around these things, this idea of getting curious about the choices we're making, and maybe choices we've been making for so long that we don't even recognize
Yeah.
that we're always at choice. We've just gotten kind of Pavlovian about how we do things. And we just fall into the, not all habits serve us and not all habits are great. So just the overall invitation to, much like dressing up for a costume party and getting to go be somebody else for a little bit. And you don't have to live there, but you get to go play around with it and see like, that's interesting. If nothing else, you have shown yourself that you can go do something that maybe part of you didn't believe was possible, or part of you is really uncomfortable with doing it. It doesn't matter how well you did it. It's just that you did it.
Right. It doesn't matter how well you did it, it's just that you did it. And this idea of play. So as I was thinking about, well, how does one hack their way into badassery? So there's the love of embracing risk in service of what you might learn on the other side of it. And embedded within this embrace of risk, I touched on curiosity and creativity, is straight up play, right? As adults, we have lost the joy of play. Play seems frivolous. Play seems like a waste of time, or something that only a dilettante would do, right? Or something that it's only for like the idle rich can go and play. Play has gotten a really bad rap. And I submit to you that if we allowed ourselves to play the same way that badasses allow themselves to play, what would be different for all of us? And so I'm like, who is an example of someone who is awesome at play? Who are these people? And I was like, oh, right, as kids, all of us played.
Yeah.
All of us played. So if we went into the Wayback Machine, it's a Mr. Peabody reference. But if we went into the Wayback Machine, I just totally took myself back. But if we went into the Wayback Machine,
You took yourself way back.
yeah, I took myself way back in the Wayback Machine, and we went to kindergarten. And we remembered that there was art class in kindergarten and first grade and wherever it was in elementary school, the number of times a week that we went to art class. Kids are not trying to be CEO of art class. Kids are not trying to be
Some may, but most are not.
some may, most are not, right? Kids are not trying to be president of Imagination Inc.
Yeah.
Right? So kids are like, "Oh great, I've got these watercolors. Let me just throw something on a piece of paper," and their imagination takes over. Yes, play does allow us to expand. That's a really great, that's a wonderful comment. Play does allow us to expand. It helps our peripheral vision. It helps us to see opportunity far and wide, more so than if we don't play. And so, if we allowed ourselves play, and in play there's iteration, right? When you see kids play dress up, or when kids are outside and they're playing whatever game they're playing, they're making up rules on the fly. And to the adults, we're like, oh, how does this game even work? It doesn't matter, right? They have decided how it is that they're going to engage with each other, and then so be it. And so what if we had this kind of combo, this math equation of embracing risk and embracing play?
Yeah. So two things that come up for me as you talk about that. And one is my son and his relationship with soccer. And I'll talk about that in a second. But first, it's for us as adults to really pay attention to our relationship and our belief, particularly professionally,
Yeah.
around where joy and work can coexist.
Yes, thank you.
Because I definitely found over the years in my work that down in there for everybody is this, it's called work for a reason, or it's everybody's got their own narrative around it, but that
Yeah,
there's friction and that joy doesn't need to exist. You talk about creativity. I mean, how many people would be willing to stand there and make a presentation on a PowerPoint that's not completely squared away, right? There are
right.
narratives inside some companies, not all, that don't feed into that. And to go back to, so again, I'm not blaming the circumstance by any stretch, but
No.
acknowledging where it's coming from, acknowledging that it exists, and then making sure that you're making choices to be able to step into that and play around the edges, and how you want to do that. And this is where I'll jump to our son, who's a soccer player, and something that we talked about. He had a tournament this weekend, some games that didn't go well, one game that was amazing. And the amazing game, did they win? Yes. But as I tell him all the time, that's not ever where I'm focused. I just want to see you being creative,
Yeah.
taking chances, giving 100%, because that transcends well beyond whatever happens on the pitch over 50 minutes for them, these 10. And what you take out of that and what you decide to take forward in life, because that becomes your experience. Where else can you show up and just play? Where else can you show up and take chances? Where else can you show up and express and also test your creativity and see what you can create, not just yourself, but with other people, and model that? To me, it's a leadership trait that we're talking about here. This goes well beyond just what we're doing, but we're also modeling for other people the possibility and inviting other people to come in and play with us.
Absolutely.
So,
This idea, and this point that you had shared with your son about, give it your best, and whatever the outcome is, we are okay with it. So kids have, sure, it's not that kids don't experience setback or disappointment. They do. There is something a little bit more, I don't know if resilient is the right word. They are better able to reconcile themselves with something not going as well as they would like as an adult. So yes, kids will have setback. They will be disappointed. They will cry, maybe even in some cases. And there is something that they find within to continue to play when they feel ready to do so. Whereas what I find in some adults is once one failure occurs, they'll never try again.
well, I think there's something interesting there, because it's, again, if I think about my son as an example, and a particular conversation that my wife and I had with him this weekend, it came around, I'll just call it what it was, some conflicting messages, right? Some
Yeah,
conflicting messages around how important it was to win, or some disappointment around not winning, and and as I think about what we're talking about in future pacing, hey, as adults, we need to get back to risk. We need to get back to play. We need to invite that, create space for that, to be able to do that, and not as like some sideline thing, but where can we do that consistently to pull at that and see what comes up. There is some point along each one of our individual journeys where I don't think it just a switch flipped, but we started to get away from that, and the x-axis is going this way and the y is going that way, and
right,
we're moving in opposite directions. And what comes up for me with him in particular was this: hey, you're going to have descending opinions, and sometimes coming from authority, and you're always at choice, dude. You're always at choice. So
right.
just be cool with the choice that you made, but you're always at choice. I would invite you to choose what's going to serve you best, which is being more creative, tapping into that. So, not that I'm trying to make this about a 10-year-old, but I think there are things that we all can look at for ourselves. Where do we find ourselves now at this point? Maybe we've spent years and years and years getting away from that. Where can we, just like you're talking about with the badassery, lean into it a little bit? We don't have to swing the pendulum back the opposite way, but we can dip our toe in the water a little bit and say, okay, where are we going to play?
Yeah.
Where are we going to allow ourselves to get a little messy and everything's not going to be perfect? Where are we going to take
Absolutely.
risks?
Oh, for sure. And so this is a really interesting comment. Adults pay a greater price for risking and failure. And that's precisely why Kevin and I are having this conversation today, is that I'm interested in flipping the script. Is I'm interested in saying, no, what lies on the other side of risk isn't failure, it's opportunity for whatever comes next. So, one of my favorite stories about badasses, Thomas Edison, not a delightful human being, right? And a genius. So Edison was completely deaf when he invented the phonograph, the what we would now call a record player. So how did Edison know that his phonograph was working? Edison had a wooden box, and then, he would have the phonograph and it would produce sound, and it, came out of this little horn looking thing. Edison bit into the side of the wooden box that he constructed, and he used the vibrations of the box created by the sound to be able to detect that that it was working. So he could have said, "Well, you know what? I've lost all my hearing. I'm going to close that door forever for anything that would produce sound." He was like, "Well, no, there is actually a creative way to get on the other side of what may be perceived as a failing on my part." There are any number of instances where people have succeeded in spite of failure. We can be inspired by Serena Williams. She didn't win every single match. We can be inspired by an Edison. Steve Jobs had a colossally bad exit from Apple before his return to Apple. And so what if we were to unpack this idea of price and say, no, there's a gift? And that's what badasses do as so well, is to say, yes, I may have a colossal failure, and I am going to persist. There's another comment. He was also driven by passion. As adults, we can easily lose our passions. That's exactly right. And that speaks to Kevin's point of the joy of work together. Like, that intersection is where you can lean into more risk and creativity and all
Yeah.
the things.
No, and I mean, and look, all these things are choices, and they are, and we can say that they're not, but they are. And just because they're not easy or there aren't consequences that come along with our choices, they are choices, right? Risk and failure as adults, sure. There's also risk and failure associated with not trying and not pushing that edge and not testing. And I can say, having is for all the things that I've done from an entrepreneurial standpoint that have worked, I've got a super long list of things that didn't. And I can't tell you how many places I failed.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I can tell you that whenever I have made choices from the place of I'm only going to do this if it succeeds, the Edison, what is it? I've
The light bulb, it's not
whatever it
that
is,
I failed, I just found 10,000 ways that had
right.
that.
I haven't, yeah, I found out 10,000 ways for it not to work. Right. So it is getting curious about our relationship with failure. And
Yeah.
I'm not here dictating to anybody what there should or shouldn't be, because that's a personal choice. But making sure, because this is something I feel exceptionally strong about, that we're not ceding agency in our own lives, dressing it up as it's not really my choice when it is. Just be okay with the choice. Be okay with the choice, because my edge is where somebody else is exceptionally comfortable, and where I'm really comfortable is somebody else's edge. And all that matters is that we have a solid relationship and understanding of what that looks like for ourselves, and we're okay. And we're not telling ourselves that we're not making a choice when we are, and be okay with the choice. And if you're not okay with the choice, play around with different choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the being okay with failure or being okay with a setback or whatever. It took me 11 years to admit that I was fired from a job. I held on to that and it festered and it festered and it festered. And now, like saying it out loud to whomever might be listening, it's not necessarily comfortable for me. It's not a moment I look back on with immense joy, right? And at the same time, because we're at choice, uh, what if I leaned into the edge of what is the lesson here and learn to embrace the creativity of that lesson as opposed to hanging on to the disappointment, the shame, the humiliation, or what have you. What would have been different? Now, I have no regrets now because it is, I mean, that experience absolutely led me to the book and what it is I do now. And at the same time, it's a really interesting reflection. I see we are at time. Kevin, this was so much fun as usual.
No, my pleasure.
If folks want to reach out to Kevin, here is his email address. And if you're interested to learn about Create Next Group, hop on over here, learn a little bit more about all the magic that Kevin is creating in the world. And if you'd like to follow up with me directly, here's how you can find me. Any last thoughts, ideas, things to share before we wrap?
Just figure out a place to go play today.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know. I don't know who's going to end up in the sandbox with me today. I may not know that that's what we're doing, but it's happening. So
it's happening, and that's part of creativity and curiosity, right?
Yep.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Kevin. This was
Hey,
fun.
thank you so much, my friend. This is fun.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.